Bootstrap Confidential, the podcast where we talk to successful bootstrappers about the playbook for bootstrapping.
Welcome to Bootstrap Confidential, where this episode I'm delighted to welcome to the show a good friend, Brett King. Brett King is a top 10 futurist. He is a best-selling author multiple times. He is a multiple successful founder. He is in the FinTech Hall of Fame and curiously and perhaps most impressively, in President Xi Jinping's address in 2018, Brett King's book Augmented was on the bookshelf behind him, which is a fantastic fact. So welcome to the show, Brett, and thanks for joining me.
Good to be back chatting with you. It's been a while.
It has been. It has been. So normally what I do on this show is I'm talking to founders about how they got started, the successes, the challenges, lessons they've learned, etc. But slightly different to usual. I'm not going to pick your brains on what it takes to be a successful founder, which you are. But I really want to tap into the fact that you're a top 10 futurist and really talk about AI because if you're about to found a business these days and you're thinking of doing that, as more and more people are, and you're looking at the world and you're looking at AI and generative AI and agentic AI, the whole world's going to be changed by AI. But where would you, with your kind of expert future vision, where would you recommend that would-be founders should perhaps focus initially and what they should be thinking about when they're thinking about how and where to start a business using AI?
I mean, I can tell you that, the tools that you have available now as a founder for helping you put together just even, your financial projections for a startup, helping you put together your business plan. The tools that are available with AI right now is just insane. I've been working on a startup for a dental AI business, a smart toothbrush actually that can detect cavities. And we did for the pitch document, putting together the financials and all of that, the use of funds and mapping that out over sort of 3 years with the revenue cycles and everything. That would have taken a team based on my previous experience, having founded a business, 3 or 4 weeks of work with multiple people working on those documents to get them together. And, we produced this stuff with the assistance of AI in less than a week with a team of like 3 or 4 people. So, and really high quality stuff as well. Yeah, we had to fix a few errors and things like that, but it just gives you such a powerful start. So I think the first thing would be just be using AI in your everyday life so you can see what capabilities it has for assisting you on this. And I think the other thing is that, listen to what people like Sam Altman and others are saying about founders and the tool sets they have. It can be a little complex in terms of all of the different options you have. Vibe coding and all of the stuff is available there as well. So don't go too much down the rabbit hole, but understand that you have a superpower as a founder today, which is you have access to these AI tool sets, which can help you in almost every aspect of the early stages of the business.
And do you think, I mean, we talk a lot of the last 20 years about unicorns and how quickly, founders get to a unicorn status. How far away are we from the first kind of AI unicorn where a founder is literally a one-person band where they've been really smart about using AI and AI tools to create solutions to a problem and they've used that to scale and they've used AI to scale and you've got to unicorn status. Is that years down the line, or do you think we're really close to that?
I mean, it's possible, right? It's theoretically possible with agentic AI to set up essentially agentic employees and to do this. If you're in some sort of smart contract-based business where you're able to set up high levels of automation for shipping and your drop shipping and your store facilities. I can see an e-com business that could be built on this. But, if you're talking about a services business or something like that, then no, it'd have to be something where automation can be applied sort of across the board. So it's not that it's unfeasible for now. It certainly, theoretically could happen at any time. Having said that, I think the pattern that we need to recognize here is that when VCs and investors are looking at startups now, then the way we used to evaluate startups, you don't have enough people for this, you don't have enough cash for this, and so forth. Those conditions are changing now. So you'll be able to get a lot further with a lot less runway than you had previously, and a lot less people, because you can augment your existing team, with these AI technologies. So I think that's the game changer right now, is that the way venture capital firms and investors will be looking at new businesses and new opportunities requires sort of a different lens from just even 5, 10 years ago.
And where do you think it's going to take VCs with valuations? Because I saw somewhere the other day that some VCs are starting to use AI to assess opportunities. And so much of, particularly we're in that when you're at a very initial phase, like with your smart toothbrush, um, it's about the vision and the fire and what you see and stuff that's perhaps not so quantitatively able to be assessed. It's a more qualitative assessment. So do you think it's smart for VCs to be using AI as part of the evaluation process, or do you think it could potentially start to have an impact where things aren't being really properly understood by AI, that because it's lacking that qualitative part?
Well, I think the way you can look at AI today is as a middle, maybe senior analyst for a research company that can go out and do the basic research. I think you still need the human touch to a certain extent. However, and one of the other aspects of sort of the AIs tend to be on the more positive side, because sort of that reinforces the usage of AI, that, you're getting good feedback from it. So, I think there may be, a need to temper some of the advice we get from AI, but certainly, you can get McKinsey level type, deep research and analysis on potential companies now, that, would have taken, an analyst weeks of work to do, and investing in the business. So you can come up to speed quite quickly on the market size and opportunity, whether or not there's differentiation in this, whether there's a technological advantage. All of those things would be, I think, easily assessed by AI in the set of research tools that we have right now. So certainly, I think as a VC, you're going to be wanting to use any tools that can reduce your risk and improve, your own knowledge of the pitch and, the substance behind that, and also give you some questions to ask, some red flags, some green flags, and things like that. So I would expect most VCs would be using this tech now. And in terms of valuation, well, I mean, valuation in the age of AI in itself is a sort of bit of a question mark. We have this massive bubble of AI right now. The US economy would technically be in recession if it wasn't for the amount of money that's being invested in AI. I think this year something like 800 billion. Without that, the global economy is going to be in trouble. But we haven't yet seen a clear ROI from the big LLMs, and with the amount of investment that we're seeing go into this, I mean, it makes the dot-com bubble look like a blip on a radar, right?
I know it's terrifying, and you're using the word bubble there. Do you think we're in bubble? I mean, like
But
readjustment
here's
territory.
here's the flip side. As a futurist, AI is probably the greatest technology impactor that humans will have seen since maybe, I don't know, the creation of the fire or printing press. It's really a major fundamental game changer. So you can't undersell the impact of AI,
Yeah.
or underestimate that. The real question is the commercialization element of it. Yes, it's going to be massively helpful in reducing operational costs, making us more efficient as a society, solving tricky problems, sort of thinking in different ways than humans in terms of that stuff. It is going to be a massive game changer. I think our kids, well, children born today will grow up in a world where they never knew without AI, without that sort of assisted augmented intelligence available on stream. So that's, it's a massive, massive change for human society. And we haven't even really begun to understand the impact it's going to have across society in general. So I will take with a pinch of salt the whole bubble characterization, because it's an economic bubble, but it's not necessarily a philosophical or technical bubble, if you get
Okay.
what I mean. Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
philosophically and technically, we're probably underestimating the impact of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, having said that, I saw a report the other day, I think in the FT, they analyzed the top 500 companies in the US to see who was actually genuinely getting any kind of ROI on AI, and it was it was scarce. I think
Mm.
Coca-Cola had used it in order to help generate an advert and an advertising campaign, and that was all they'd done with AI, despite the fact that all 500 companies were referencing AI as being a game changer and driving down costs and increasing margins, et cetera, et cetera. But just talking about fire and the printing press and the advent of technology. I know you've read and are a fan of The Second Machine Age by Andrew McAfee and Eric
Bjornson.
Bjornson.
Yep.
But with .com and with tech in the noughties and 2010s, we very much saw a similar kind of thing where people didn't initially re-engineer processes. They simply used digital to slightly upgrade the process. And if we talk about banking, which you're obviously both familiar with, you went from having, okay, you get this experience with a branch, then you get the experience online, then you get the experience via an app, but it was relatively the same experience. And then fintechs came along and actually re-engineered the entire process to create a different experience. But that took a period of time to really work. With AI, do you think we're going to have a much faster route to hang on a second? Why are we using AI just to improve this? We can use AI to completely reinvent how we do it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's the difference this time is AI will help us understand that our existing processes in certain areas are very inefficient, right? And we will be able to rethink through things because, for example, where we've had human analysis and advisory components, that's going to be radically impacted. So let's take, fields like financial service advisors, private bankers, doctors, lawyers, accountants, in each of these areas where we've had a human advisor interpret this deep information expertise in a particular domain and translate it for you, AI is going to be much, much better at that than humans. Right. So, and that's something that, we're not used to. Secondly, as Yuval Noah Harari, from Sapiens fame points out that this is the first technology we've had that has agency. This is the first technology we can send off to do something on its own without human interaction. That's the difference with what you're describing in, say, banking in .com, because there's still a human in control, even though you've digitized a process. But when you can remove a process entirely by just sending an AI agent off to do something, I mean, that's a game changer. And then you can replicate as many AI agents as you want, doing as many functions of the business as you want. And ideally, those AI agents are going to get together. They're going to get smarter. They're going to figure out more efficient ways of partnering and sort of doing automation at that level. And suddenly, you've got this black box functionality of stuff that's happening that humans are no longer connected to in the way we are with business process today. So that's sort of the way I see it developing. Specifically on the banking, though, what's interesting is none of and this counts for healthcare and so many other businesses, none of the systems that we use in traditional banks today are fit for purpose for AI. You can't run AI on a 1960s era core mainframe, banking core. You can't run highly automated smart contract systems on fiat currency. You're always going to have to be swapping in and out of tokens and so forth if you're doing that. So you're better off creating sort of essentially, autonomous finance rails, which are net new technologies, net new payment systems. You're using tokenization and stable coins, maybe CBDCs in there, and these smart contracts are sitting on systems attached to traditional banking systems because you're paying in and out of traditional accounts. But essentially, all of this traffic over the next 30, 40 years will move to more sort of stable coin tokenized operations. And which that sort of starts me thinking as a banker is what's the value of money in that future system? Because if it gets so automated, it's a black box and it's just running tokens, then what's the value of and the utility of money in that system if it's not related to, I don't know, energy or the amount of compute power you can throw at it. So we're heading into sort of interesting times.
Yeah, so you talk about black boxes and and agentic AI, working with agentic AI. So from a healthcare point of view, from a financial services point of view, obviously that starts to create kind of alarm bells. Like if you remove humans from the process altogether, how do you control it? How do you potentially regulate it? So what there are obviously very different approaches in the US, in the UK, in some of the Asian economies towards AI and how to work with it. So where do you think the right amount of kind of regulation is to allow AI to flourish, but at the same time to make sure that there's an element of control and we're not kind of like, as lots of doomsayers are saying in the media, we haven't unwittingly opened Pandora's box and no one knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah, the core problem with regulation and supervision in this industry, in this area arena, is that humans won't be very good at supervising AI because of what we've just talked about. So you really need regulation as infrastructure. You need to have embedded technology infrastructure which has the brakes on it, has the systems that can control this, and we don't see that today. In terms of ethical frameworks for AI operation, both the EU and China have come up with fairly good ethical operations. The US is a disastrous situation because it's essentially self-managed by the tech companies, and that's the way their lobbying groups have managed to get regulation written in the United States today. I think that's a really bad idea. I do think you need sort of independent ethical standards for the operation of AI embedded in sort of legal constructs and then embedded in some sort of, verifiable or testable technology layer. So, think about it this way. You maybe have a compliance or regulatory AI, which is essentially the AI that's looking at ethical development, and it's constantly probing and testing LLMs or testing different platforms to make sure they're safe and flagging when there's a problem. I think that's the type of AI regulation we need. It's not just regulation. It needs to be something with, some operational teeth in terms of actually being able to test these things. We do have some industry standard tests available for cognition and whether we've met AGI standards and things like that. So those tests are administered in this way. So there is a precedent for this type of regulatory infrastructure. But we really need to start thinking about AI as core infrastructure in the economy, data centers as core infrastructure, and also things like what are the energy requirements in order to be able to run this type of stuff, and what sort of energy transformation does that require? This is probably the one single reason why the US won't lead in industrial AI globally, why China will lead, because they're not making enough investment in next generation energy technologies that's going to be able to enable access to sort of industrial level AI across the economy quickly enough. There's, particularly the recent administration is sort of doubling down on coal again and things like that. Well, it takes you 10 years to build a coal plant. So by the time you've built a new coal plant that can cater for the energy demands of industrial AI, it's game over already. China's already won. So the aversion to renewables in markets like the US and Australia, I think, is going to be damaging from an AI perspective on that front. But that's sort of how I think about the problem.
Okay, because that's an interesting. I mean, obviously, data centers are being spoken about a lot at the moment because the massive amount of investment, and and the questions appearing in various stock pickers. Are we ever going to need all these data centers? To which the answer is probably quite clearly yes. But data centers require a huge amount of energy and water. So there are
Yeah,
significant.
that's how we're measuring data centers now. We measure them in gigawatts of energy, right? That's how we measure the size of a data center. We don't. We used to measure it in petaflops or the amount of GPUs that we had. Now we're measuring it in energy consumption. So it's very very clearly linked. That infrastructure is linked to energy.
I want to talk about trust for a second because we've seen this in lots of fields, but whenever a new technology comes along, there's always consumer trust issues. There are always the early adopters. There's the laggards. Talking about the printing press, we can call them the Luddites. But and the security concerns are particularly around personal data, be it personal health data, personal financial data, any kind of personal data, and what happens once it's out there, who has access to it, who's controlling it. So if we think about healthcare at the moment, where I know there's a lot of opportunities, utilizing AI. Do you think we're going to go through a similar, quite slow journey as we move from early adopters to kind of more mass adoption because of security concerns? Or do you think that this time there are going to be ways that we can address those security and trust concerns? Because the whole nature of trust is changing as a result of this. So, what are your thoughts in that kind of area?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's happening a little bit earlier than I anticipated. But for example, people are trusting AI for medical diagnosis more than they're trusting human doctors in many instances now, right? We're seeing ample evidence of the fact that even, rudimentary medical tools like ChatGPT, which is not designed for medical diagnostics, is doing a better job than most humans. And the reason for this is fairly straightforward. It's information asymmetry. Every year the medical, and health research segments, they publish 500,000 medical journals a year. Well, there's not a single human doctor on the planet that could absorb all that information
Yeah.
and be up to date with medical diagnostics. And we're making such significant advances in gene therapy and, genetics and diagnostic capability and so forth right now that, we really need these tool sets. So I think trust will develop naturally through those systems where people are just going, well, holy crap, ChatGPT just diagnosed my illness and I've been trying to get this treated for the last 5 years and no doctor's given me the right answer. And every doctor I now go and give this diagnosis that ChatGPT came up with says, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's fairly obvious now that you put it that way, or something like that. So I don't think the trust issue will be as significant, but I have a rather pragmatic view of this, which it just doesn't matter because capitalism wants this, because this is the greatest value creation tool in the history of technology, right? Because AI, and this is the other flip side of the conversation we're about to have, I'm sure, is that AI is designed for taking human labor out of the workforce to make corporations as efficient capital users and profit generators as possible, right? So let me give you an example. What's the most profitable form of ride sharing company? Autonomous vehicles without human drivers, autonomous booking systems run by agentic AI. That's the most profitable form of that. What's the most profitable form of factories that are on the planet today? These are autonomous dark factories that don't have a single human on the factory floor. We see a very clear pattern here, and people like Sam Altman are telling us exactly where this is going to go. They're talking about single person unicorns, but what they're also saying is all these other businesses that we've already got, they're going to need less humans as well. And that's the greatest investment, opportunity that capitalism's seen in the last 300 years. So the market is going to be rushing to implement AI wherever possible. And that may lead to problems because we don't have the safeguards in place, purely because it's just such a massive opportunity in terms of value creation.
So, without going into all the social issues that creates as you free up the human labor force, which we could talk about for quite some time. So, if you're how do you differentiate? So you're a founder, you've come up with a solution like using AI, and you go to a company and say, I can save you a heap of costs because I've worked with an AI tool to develop X, Y, Z. How does that not how do you create something that is unique and not well, if you can do it with AI, anyone can do it with AI, and that means it's ubiquitous, and then there's no secret sauce there, there's no USP, there's no reason to work with you. How as a founder do you work with AI to create a unique experience?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Right now, I think it's all about speed, but that's going to change. Right now it's about who can sort of demonstrate this stuff fastest and sort of suck in enough cash to scale. But I do think at the same time there will be differentiations in respect to you being able to really create new types of paradigms, new types of applications, different ways of thinking about things. Because, suddenly all these limitations that we had previously in terms of business process and the need, well, I can't do this, I can't be a founder because I really don't know about managing money. Well, I've had no accounting experience. I don't know about setting up companies, all of those constraints that you'd have, which is a steep learning curve for a first time founder, suddenly they go away. Right. And so, your ability to experiment and sort of get stuff out and prototype stuff is second to none now. I think the other element of this is, coming back to the social disruption, because I think we should talk about that to some extent. A lot of entrepreneurs are talking about giving universal basic income, and there's been I saw Kostler talking about this the other day. Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, Sam Altman, all of them talk about universal basic income as a solution to this problem, and we've got lots of debates about how we might pay for that. But one of the really interesting things that came out of my research for my book, The Rise of Technosocialism, was that of the 70 UBI trials that we catalogued up until that point, most of them had generated significant results where people started their own businesses at a much higher rate than the general
Okay.
population. We're talking 2 to 3 times higher rate of new entrepreneurs creating their own business compared with the traditional market. So, that's a positive element of this, is that people can be more experimentational. They won't have the financial constraints that they had previously. I can't start a business. I don't have any money. I don't know the right people to build this team. Like suddenly now you might have the tools to be able to do that. So I think, the process of ideation and creation of new ideas is sort of going to be let off a leash to some extent.
And what about the flip side? So, if we go back to the .com, there's never, human bookstores are going to disappear, like in-person bookstores and everything. And and Amazon, which was obviously a bookstore originally, Barnes and Noble, their stock crashed and everything. And anyway, as we know, bookstores in-person bookstores have come back almost as a reaction to online publishing. But I was at an event in Singapore recently, hosting a breakfast, talking about data and wealth and things, and some of the people in the room said, "This is absolutely fantastic because I can get the data without coming to this event. What I can't get is talking to my peers face to face and getting that human interaction." So as much as clearly AI is going to have big implications for senior researchers, junior analysts, because it can do that job so much quicker, where a quantitative analysis of everything that's out there. But on the qualitative side, do you think we're going to see more and more businesses that are focused, I mean, almost, in the way that the pandemic disrupted the person-to-person events business and those type of things? Do you think we're going to see the rise of those as people look to have that kind of like social human
Yeah,
connection?
I hope so. As a speaker on the speaking circuit. No, but No, I mean, I do think that the human factor, I think we'll have more time for that. And I think we'll want to get back to what makes us human and let the tech do the tech, let the AI do the tech stuff and humans do the human stuff, And I think this is where, the most logical conclusion of all of this is that we start to be a lot more purpose driven. Is that we are looking for, we have now all this AI that can automate business at scale, and it's creating immense profits and so forth, but what do we do with this free time and these resources and the capabilities we have? It's got to be social good, right? It's got to be fixing homelessness, reducing poverty or eliminating poverty, longevity science, improving health span. All of those things are possible in this world in terms of social mission. So when we are freed up from basically value creation as a unit of the economy, which is what we are today, measured in the number of widgets we produce or the amount of salary we get paid. Instead is now, what do you do if you only have to work 3 or 4 days a week? How do you use that extra time? Do you use it to be healthier? Do you use it to spend more time with your family? Do you use it to invest in social causes? Those sorts of things. And as more automation comes online, how does that change the way society looks? The really interesting piece of this is that the more automation you put in the system, the less effective capitalism will be. So we need new economic thinking. We need new systems of thinking. There's a really great futurist out of the west coast of the US called Dave Shapiro, who talks about the meaning and purpose economy. And I think that's a way I like to think about it as well, is that, when we're freed up from the drudgery of having to work just to put food on the table and a roof over our heads, what happens next is interesting. What do you do when your work is not, directly connected to your finances, and instead you have the choice of what you can do that you think really makes a difference?
It's a big existential question. But just talking about work. So if we go back to the turn of the last century, in 1915, I think it was 45% of US workers worked in agriculture on farms. And
Yep.
when agricultural machinery came along, there was a huge amount of pushback about this is going to take away jobs. People aren't going to find jobs. And by
But they went into
1935,
factories. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. By 1935, only 5% of the US worked in agriculture, and the other 40% had found new jobs that were created by the machinery. And obviously, with the smartphone, that created the app industry and all
Yep.
the good and perhaps some not so great things that have hung off that with content creators and influencers, etc., etc. So, if you gaze into your futurist crystal ball, what'll be some of the new types of things that you think will be created from a job, and I use that word in the loosest
Sure.
definition of the word, as a result of AI over the next 5 to 10 years?
One of the major areas will be human therapy, and sort of adjustment to all of these changes. So, uh, you know, uh, the mental health industry, I think, is going to get a big boom. Obviously, there's going to be a boom in AI specialization in various fields. Right now today, I say there's two types of people in the world: those who are using AI to improve their career and improve their business, and those who are going to be replaced by the first category of person. So, you have to be in the game. But on a longer term basis, if you look at 20 years from now, the single biggest industry on the planet that's going to require a lot of human effort and human labor, even if it is to direct robotics and, next generation technologies, is climate mitigation and climate adaptation, right? And that's going to be the biggest industry on the planet in the 2050s and 2060s. It could repurpose 40 to 60% of global GDP, depending on how significant the changes we see are. So, there's plenty for humans to do in this new era. Not only that, but think about all of the longevity services by middle of 2030s, certainly by the end of next decade, there's going to be meaningful longevity treatments. You will be able to extend your lifespan and health span by decades if you apply these technologies. Think about the number of services that are going to come along in that area. You know, think about the more experiential side of humanity. You know, if you have more free time, what are you going to do? Well, we saw it during the pandemic when working from home became a thing. We suddenly had people who were remote workers that decided to travel and travel the world and work remotely and things like that. So you extend that with now you don't have the financial constraints that you had previously. And, you know, how many people would choose to travel more or do those sorts of things? So the experiential economy is going to be a big deal as well. There's certainly many areas where we could see new job creation, but keep in mind these jobs are not going to replace the old jobs in the way we think of it today. It's going to be sort of like a net new layer of services and new industries that are coming along, because pretty much everything that we do today that's process driven will be taken by automation. And that's why and because this is going to happen quite quickly, you're not going to be able to create new jobs for people that have been displaced by technology unemployment fast enough to be able to stop this sort of systemic shock, large scale unemployment and so forth. So those that are saying, look, we've always created new jobs for those that have been lost by technology, it's just going to happen too quickly this time for us to absorb that shock. So we need something like UBI as a mechanism to
Bridging mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. I went to a lecture by Sam Altman just over 15 months ago in London, where one of the questions was, if you were sending your child to university, what would you suggest that they study? And he said philosophy. Yeah, philosophy. He said we're employing like philosophy graduates left, right, and center because it's not what can we do, it's what should we do,
Should we
which is
do?
is the big question.
Yeah.
Okay, just one final question because we're sort of coming to the end of time. So you're looking at the world as a futurist, this plethora of opportunities. You've obviously got the new startup you're working with in dental healthcare. But what are one or two problems right now which are almost glaringly obvious where you thought, you know what, if there was another 48 hours in the week, and I had a bit more time on your ridiculous schedule, that's something I'd look at because that's kind of interesting and that's something that we could fix pretty quickly working with
Yep.
AI, utilizing AI. What are some of the two or three ideas that you would throw out there as being worth casting a glance over and poking around in the corners of?
You could automate all accounting and tax reporting and tax processing pretty easily with technologies we have today. So think about the fact, you log into your bank account, your internet banking as a business, and all of your accounts are done and your taxes are filed. That could be done immediately and would save so many headaches for so many people. It would destroy the accounting industry overnight, but on the positive side, we'd see better tax compliance and things like that. So, I think that's a pretty obvious area where I sort of don't know why there haven't been more startups sort of working on that to date. I know there are some interesting collaborations going on with Zero and Starling and some others for that, but that's one area which would be an obvious. And the other thing would be I would be obviously looking at trying to open up medical data in the same way we have financial data to allow
Okay.
us to have the AI diagnostics capability on all of that health data you have. You should never go to a medical practitioner ever again and the doctor says, tell me about your family's medical history. That should just never happen in this day and age. We have all of that data. We should have your genetic data. Everyone should be tested for DNA, screened that level. And I know people are going to be concerned about privacy and so forth, but the amount of advances we're going to see in healthcare and the reduction in national healthcare cost and the improvement in the efficiency of the administration of healthcare with AI is going to be just incredible. So they're the two areas where I would see sort of immediate impact, or I'd like to see more immediate action.
And you mentioned privacy there, so just one more question. Obviously, personal data being hacked, financial data, health data, it's a huge social and political issue. It happens more and more constantly. Fraud, as we know, particularly bank fraud and cybersecurity, is going through the roof in every market. Are there is on obviously they should you should be able to use AI to better protect against that, but then are you effectively what's the phrase, turning the gamekeeper into the policeman or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
is that a solution? What, as more and more things going, if we've got open banking and now we have like an open healthcare, as you say, how do we protect ourselves? Can we use AI for that? And is
Yeah.
that an opportunity in itself to be creating new businesses and new tools?
We can. I think that, as a futurist, I'll tell you what's going to happen is that the focus is going to shift off of data security and data privacy to data ownership, right?
Okay.
We won't be as concerned. The next generation, Gen Zs and Alphas, they don't care about privacy, right? So we're moving into a generational shift in respect to privacy. Their lives will be largely public. There'll be sensors all around them 24/7. So privacy is an outdated, antiquated concept to them. But ownership becomes important. Like, what is your health data? How should you be able to leverage that? You should be able to leverage that to get better quality service, to get optimized, personalized service, not to have your insurance premiums upped because we flagged something in your DNA as a possible risk, right? So, what we need there is a clear pattern of data ownership. And there's a couple of efforts at this happening right now. Brazil's looking at a law for this, and the EU is looking at a law for this, moving away from the GDPR constraints today to something that says, all right, your data is valuable, and if an AI is going to use that data to build out, these models, you should be compensated at some point, or there should be some trade-off for the use of your data. So that's, I think, your personal wallet in your smartphone or in the cloud in the future will not only store things like your wallet balance, your crypto, your account information, things like that, but also store your personal data behind a vault, and you will decide, or your personal AI will decide when and how that data is used.
Fantastic. Brett, as always, it's fascinating talking to you. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insights, and could talk for ages, but we'll talk again soon. But thanks very much for joining us.
No worries, Charles. Good to see you.
For all our listeners, if you'd like to hear more podcasts on how to bootstrap, or if you want to access all our bootstrapping resources and playbooks, then just go to our website, www.bootstrapconfidential.com, for free registration.